because one of the biggest things we're going to tackle right now is the governance, and so that's what Marcin's going to talk about, is how do we govern the blockchain without killing it along the way. So Marcin, come on the stage. He is the head of strategy at Tokenika, which is a block producer. He's also the head of strategy at Signet, which is an identity solution on the blockchain. So we have a real expert here to take us.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Miles. That was very informative. You've done half of the heavy lifting for me already, so it's going to be much easier. So that is the exact question we're asking. How do you govern a blockchain without killing it? And it's a sensitive one, because we all know that whatever brought us to crypto in the first place was this need for a trustless sort of a protocol, that we don't have to actually rely on anyone to get our stuff done, and the less trust, the better. And all of a sudden, we come up with all these issues that Miles was talking about. Money gets lost and all that. So EOS, we've actually been involved with delegated proof of stake for many, many years, probably been like 5 or 6. We remember, I think the birthing of BitShares was when we first discovered it, and we thought it was a very powerful platform to actually tackle some of these issues that we saw coming, and governance was one of those. So when we got into EOS, it was sort of a natural ground for us to think that this is going to be taken so much further because of the smart contract layer that was possible on it. And then this happened. I don't know, how many of you actually hold EOS tokens? Have a show of hands. Okay, we're going to be slightly preaching to the choir here, but here we go. Is this working? Okay. So obviously, it's a multinational, non-homogeneous crowd that we are. We're coming from multiple jurisdictions. There's legal systems involved, cultural differences, whatever. So we argue that there is extremely hard to instate a single governance body on EOS that is going to be effective with any kind of disputes or anything related to these human problems. And the last thing is, even if it is technically successful in some miraculous way, that's a point of failure. That's where we attack the system when we want to bring it down. Actually, these are the people that we talk to, then we try to threaten their families and do all the stuff that we've seen happen in the real world for so many years now. So as Miles was speaking, actually some of this he's already said for me, the DPOS governance model, the token holders vote with their stake to appoint block producers like ourselves, for example, to authorize transactions. We have a lot of tools in our hands to affect the code base, change the system contracts, and actually influence individual accounts also. And to push through most of the decisions, we need either a 2/3 + 1 quorum or 100% agreement. It depends on the issue at hand. So the responsibility on BPs is quite profound. Right? We actually hold the integrity of the network. Again, thanks, Miles. The Constitution. So in the original vision of EOS, Dan Larimer assumed the existence of the Constitution, and everybody who holds EOS is supposed to abide it. But it did not specify the rule set. So it's a tricky one. It is a bit of a hippie concept, right? We want to make a world a better place, and we wait until that happens. But and then what? I don't know. I mean, let's just make it better. And then, again, it was drafted, actually, before the launch by one of the Block One's employees, our friend and foe, Thomas Cox, I believe it was. And we see right now that it's not easily enforceable. It requires legal authority and some kind of a leverage over everyone to actually work. But who is to do that? There is no sort of appointed body. It was not ratified by the token holders, and that's his interim, because it was never voted upon. Again, this is something Miles was talking about. In the EOS Constitution, there is an EOS Core Arbitration Forum. So this, again, was more of a concept and an idea. To all the people who are confused here about what ECAF is because it is confusing, because it never was clarified. It was stated as a name, to populate at some point by some individuals or some process that has never really happened. So the way we see it is ECAF was spontaneously populated by volunteers saying, okay, I'm going to be an arbitrator. I feel like I'm qualified for that. And then that sort of happened. Again, like I just said, like it was not defined exactly who is to constitute it. From our personal experience with ECAF, there have been backlogged with small cases of thefts, lost keys, and all this crap that happens. So scalability isn't there, and it's never going to be in a body like this. It takes several weeks to deal with a case. And another thing is way too slow to actually deal with anything real. It takes weeks for them to process a case, and thieves cash out in seconds, especially in such a super fast blockchain like EOS is with. Rob Finch was talking about it. It takes milliseconds to leave the ecosystem. And I think if you're a thief, you don't want to hang around. So this is a bit of a, it's a bit of a ploy. It's like it doesn't even, yeah, so good intentions, you know, we can have a hippie festival, but it's nothing to do with anything workable. So what kind of governance are we really looking for? First of all, it's not prone to corruption and self-appointed. That is not good governance. That we've seen everywhere in the world, and we're actually trying to change that. And yes, we are hippies in that context, but I think we're like the tech hippies, so we might still have a chance if we do it right. We need one that leaves freedom for users to select jurisdictions. This is super important. We're talking about global blockchains all the time, right? And then we think a single entity can rule it. No way. We need to invite big businesses and let them set up their way of doing things. There's no other way for a blockchain to get mass adoption. If we don't do that, nothing's ever going to happen. So these are and the last but not least, it's scalable, cheap, and almost 100% of the time it should be hands-free. So we don't get to, like, I don't know, sit in closed rooms and debate whether who's a good guy or who's not. So now we're getting on to this, how to actually solve this. Because before I go to this next slide, I think a big source of this confusion that we're facing in EOS right now, the two different governances got confused. And one was the governance that had to do with the network integrity, with the safety of the system per se. And the other governance was telling the good guys from the bad guys. And that all got bundled up into one thing and is getting disputed as one thing. And these are two different things. So what we are actually advocating is that the DPOS governance, the delegated proof of stake, the voting for block producers, is the governance that we're talking about. We don't need to fix that right now. And it's not about telling who's good, who's bad. It's about keeping the network together. It's making an EOS behave like an Ethereum that can backpedal out of a DAO crisis, for example. If there's like a multi-billion-dollar something, or things go wrong like terribly, we can actually back out of that. But all the small frauds, because I forgot my keys and this happened and that should never be part of governance in this context. Having said all that, it's possible to build businesses on EOS that also tackle this problem really well because of the smart contract layer. And I'm going to explain here how a properly arbitrated transfer should work on EOS when we're not pestering block producers to take back transactions like ECAF does right now, and it still protects the users from all kinds of mishaps, provided they know how to interface with the system. But this is, again, the building process, which is going to take a while. And like Miles was saying on Rob also, we're in the early days of this. So there's no way everything's going to work as advertised. But here we're going to see how Alice is selling Bob her smartphone for 100 EOS in the arbitrated transfer that is actually possible, and it doesn't include ECAF in it. It's a commercial arbitrator, and I'm going to talk you through it. So this is very simple. It's integrated into a wallet. This is, of course, a mock-up. We choose for that particular transaction who's going to do the protection for us. We choose Materium because we like these guys. This actually has a typo. Sorry, Mr. Vinay Gupta. We're going to correct that. And, oh, now the typo's gone. It's Materium spelled correctly. So it just happened. We transferred from Bob to Alice is 100 EOS. And Materium is the arbitrator. But what does that actually mean? What does that actually mean under the hood? What has happened? Oh, that's a bit of a surprise. I think this slide got misplaced. But just let me jump forward. Okay. So what we have here, the commercial arbitrator, in this case it's going to be Materium. It's like a walled jurisdiction. It's actually a smart contract that deals with this process in a peculiar way. So what's going to happen is Bob is sending his 100 EOS to the contract. The 100 EOS gets staked on the edge of the contract and issues 100 of arbitrated EOS inside the contract, which is a different token, but it's pegged 1-to-1, and it's hard-coded in a way that the Materium arbitrator cannot issue these tokens out of thin air. They act as a help desk in this transaction. So they send a message to Alice saying that your money's here. It's actually made it. Obviously, she sends her smartphone to Bob. Now the system sends the message. Bob sends the message to Materium saying that smartphone is okay. So now this is burned. And the money is moved to Alice. And why do we bother doing this? Because if things went wrong, this arbitrator would be the help desk that the people would call. And this smartphone wouldn't be a smartphone, it would be a container of smartphones coming from China. And that's who we call and say, okay, only half of it made it. What do we do? And then the arbitrator steps in, contacts all of us, and says, okay, apparently this is the case, so how about you split the 50-50, and we move the funds around because we have the keys right here, right now. We don't have to call anyone and retrospectively reverse whatever's already happened, like with the use of ECAF or whatever, and take it from there. And we can resolve any crisis with that. And these arbitrators, these walled jurisdictions, can actually be very complex business logics built on EOS. So you can imagine a Deloitte running an entire set of services on EOS for people who need it. And they conduct all kinds of transactions, all kinds of businesses. These could be multi-sig wallets, which I'm going to talk about in a second. Also, multi-stage ICOs, for example, that require voting by the people involved, so that when the project progresses, the next tranche of funds is released. So this is like with Ethiep. This is, again, a bit of an ECAF offshoot. A lot of this presentation actually happened because of our anger with what was happening with ECAF. And so a lot of it is pretty peculiar in that, but the constant need for protecting everyone on EOS from harm made us think, like, what the hell is going on here? Like, this is looking ridiculous. We don't want to be a part of something that is so unscalable and so flawed from the beginning. So also, this here thing with the thief was something that is a part of a narrative that was played a lot. But the way it would look is Alice would actually stake her tokens with the multi-sig smart contract, and Deloitte would be the one keeping, like, an eye on her wallet. And since these tokens aren't EOS, they're like Deloitte arbitrated EOS, there can be a ton of constraints on how to move these things around. She can whitelist stuff, she can put time delays, she can do all kinds of things. So this is, I mean, you're obviously all very intelligent people, but this is pretty basic. Thieves trying to steal the Alice's keys. Of course, the same process happens. This is a two-factor authentication, so we actually have a crypto help desk. Alice responds accordingly. So this is what happens, right? That's the thief. The commercial arbitrator. And these are the staked tokens on the side of the contract, right here. So that's about it. I think really the final words to this is that the confusion needs to be sorted out. We need to separate the governance over the blockchain itself from the governance of who's good and who's bad. There's no way to move forward if we don't start separating these two things. DPOS, in our eyes, we've seen BitShares, we've seen Steam, like one of our team members is actually the #1 witness on Steam, which is like the block producer equivalent. And these things do have their birthing pains, and they're still babies, but they're actually very efficient. A lot of stuff has been working there very well, and we don't need to tweak this thing too much. Of course, there's issues with Chinese whales and whatever, but I think it's so early right now that we're going to see this settle down and come to some sort of equilibrium. And we argue that DPOS is good enough of a governance protocol to call EOS a governed blockchain and not, I will want to swear, but I won't, and not mess around with whatever is needed to go forward. All the individual frauds, cases of legal fallout and all that, this is actually a brilliant business opportunity for big lawyer firms to set up these multi-sig contracts, and this is actually also what we're trying to facilitate. So as Tokenika, in disguise, last night at the hackathon, we actually drafted one of these smart contracts for the arbitrators so they could use it as their boilerplate, so Deloitte can just take our contract and set up their business on it. And we are operating in disguise because block producers are not allowed to participate in the hackathon. So that's everything for me. If you have any questions, fire away. And Tokenika, yeah, we're a leading Central European EOS block producer, just so you know. Thank you very much.